Hello and welcome to Horrific Tales. In this show we celebrate the creations of independent authors and aspiring writers. Please like and subscribe and share these episodes so we can help our talented friends get as much exposure as possible. We would also appreciate if you could support our artists by following them on their individual platforms and by purchasing their works. Details on how to do this are in the episode description. In this horrific tale, two business partners find themselves taking part in a mediation session of the most extreme nature. This is an audiobook excerpt narrated by Vivienne Leheny. Join us now as we present The Fine Print by Mark Tullius.
The Fine Print. Mr. Cohen handed Stan and Gary their contracts, then laid his folded hands on his mahogany desk. Cohen's black suit, blue tie, crisp white shirt, and manicured hands screamed class. But the look was a bit too stuffy for Stan. Stan looked great in a suit, but he'd rather throw on a nice pair of jeans and a snug polo so he wouldn't be too intimidating to women who might want to approach him. Gentlemen, before we get started, let me just make certain that you understand how this works. This is mediation, not arbitration. There is no judge or jury, just the two of you talking out your differences, with me helping you come to a satisfactory resolution. Anxious to get it over with, Stan said, "We got it." "Gary, how about you? Any questions?" Not surprisingly, Gary shook his head, unable to assert himself and speak even a one-word answer. "Then if you would both please review the contract and sign and date it. Today is the 30th. Stan turned to the back of the 10-page contract. "What exactly am I signing here? Not promising my firstborn or anything like that," he joked, flashing his winning smile and turning the charm on, already trying to get Cohen in his corner. "It simply states that the resolution you reach is binding and cannot be appealed. It also waives your right to sue Final Solution if things don't go the way you expected them to." Stan put pen to paper, chuckling as he scrawled his name. "Not too worried about that." "I recommend that you read the whole thing." Stan flipped through the pages to satisfy Cohen. "Looks like your standard contract. I'd like to get this thing started if we could." Stan looked to his right. Gary was on page 3. "Come on, man. I don't have all day." "He can take as long as he needs." Predictably, Gary folded under Stan's pressure and turned to the last page. After carefully signing his name, he handed the contract to Cohen. Speaking to Stan, but looking straight ahead, he asked, "Happy?" Stan slid his contract across the desk to the mediator. "Very. Let's start." Cohen held up a finger as he checked the signatures. Stan was tempted to reach across the desk and snap the pretentious prick's finger in two, but instead he sat there with a smile pasted on his face. "One more thing," Cohen said as he looked up from the contracts. "I'll need both of your watches and cell phones." Stan looked down at his Cartier and shook his head. "I don't think so." "It's one of my rules. No phones, clocks, watches, or hourglasses. Once this thing is started, we don't finish until we've reached a satisfactory conclusion." Gary handed over his phone and cheap Timex. Stan took his time unclasping his watch. Cohen took it from him and walked to a paneled wall. When he pushed the middle section of the wall, a panel slid to the side, revealing a safe. With his back blocking their view, Cohen dialed in the combination, opened the safe, and inserted the contracts and their belongings. Before closing the safe, Cohen pushed a button that unlocked the hidden door next to it. Stan pretended to be impressed. "Wow, look at you, all Mission Impossible." Cohen pulled the door open and motioned for the men to head down the dimly lit concrete hallway. "Not exactly. We just respect our clients' privacy. And can you really blame me for not wanting this ugly door in the middle of my office?" Stan glanced about the plush office. "You've got a point. Plus, people would be wondering where that door went instead of listening to what you were saying. Gary, who had just entered the hallway, took the bait. Where does it go? Cohen took off his jacket and hung it on the back of his chair. Last door on the left. Stan strode down the long hallway, breathing down Gary's back. When Gary stepped into the room and stopped abruptly, Stan stumbled and collided into Gary's back. What the hell, dickweed? Why did you stop? You should watch where you're going, Gary said under his breath. Enough of that. Cohen walked between the two men. Gary, have a seat over there, he said, pointing to the edge of the sunken concrete pit that filled the room. Stan, you take that side. Stan looked where Cohen was pointing. Are you serious? There's no cushion. Take a seat, Stan. Gary walked to his side of the pit, stepped into it, and sat on the edge. Stan went to his side and plopped down onto the hard concrete. Trying to make light of the uncomfortable situation, he said, Fill this thing with water and we've got ourselves one hell of a jacuzzi. I'll line up the coos if you handle the booze. I thought you wanted to get started, Stan. Cohen's dry, monotone voice was starting to grate on Stan's nerves. Stan looked away from Cohen and caught Gary smirking. He restrained himself from dashing across the 8 feet that divided them and smashing him in the face. What's so funny, you little pencil-neck geek? Cohen stepped to the edge of the pit. Stan, that's the last time you insult Gary without there being a consequence. Understood? Don't speak to me like I'm a child. Don't act like one. Stan's blood was boiling. He didn't trust himself to look at Cohen, but staring across at Gary was almost as bad. Now, if you two are ready to start, please place your feet on the markings in front of you. The outlines of 2 feet were painted on the concrete floor a few inches away from the step. When Stan placed his feet inside the markings, 2 metal shackles shot out from the wall inside the pit and clasped both ankles. He jumped to his feet and nearly fell over as the restraints prevented him from moving forward. Easy, Stan, Cohen said. It's part of the session. They don't hurt, do they? Stan looked across at Gary, who was sitting there acting as if the ankle chains didn't bother him. He sat back down on the concrete ledge. Speaking to Cohen, he said, You could have warned us. Relax, Stan, Gary said. They're not going to hurt you. Cohen pressed the intercom on the wall and said, We're ready. A few moments later, the door across the hall opened, and 2 men with wheelbarrows full of wood entered the mediation room. The 2 men placed their wheelbarrows at the edge of the sunken pit and constructed a 3-foot-high pile of logs directly between Gary and Stan. The 2 workers left the room with their empty wheelbarrows. Stan joked, Where are the marshmallows? Sorry, Stan, but we don't provide any treats. Trying not to sound nervous, but smelling the familiar scent of lighter fluid, Stan asked, So, what's all this? It's our way of teaching you both a valuable lesson. Each time one of you says something negative about the other, you are adding fuel to the fire instead of putting it out. Some people have difficulty grasping that concept. Here, at Final Solution, we have made it a little more real. The 2 workers came back with wheelbarrows overflowing with wood and set them on either side of Cohen. One placed a large fire extinguisher next to Cohen's feet. Stan thought the whole idea was stupid, but he would play along. Oh, I get it. As soon as I say something about him, you light the fire. Cohen pulled a lighter from his suit and flicked the flame on. You're exactly right. Hold on a second. You can't be serious, Gary said, squirming away from the pile of logs. I'm out of here. So you're willing to let all of your claims go? You're going to give the business to Stan? Yeah, Gary, just give it to me. You know I should have it anyway. Gary settled down. I'm not giving you anything. Good, Cohen said, still holding the burning lighter. It'd be such a waste setting all this up for nothing. Discuss your problems like rational men. Let's come to a resolution. I hate to tell you this, but I wouldn't call threatening to set a fire between us as being the most rational thing I've ever seen. Stan, we've never had a case come to an unsatisfactory conclusion. What other mediator can promise a 100% success rate? Then let's do it. This smell is giving me a headache. Stan looked across the mound of logs. You ready, weasel boy? Cohen tossed the lighter onto the pile, setting it ablaze. He pressed a button on the wall, turning on the exhaust fans installed above the pit. Cohen faced them with a smile. I told you that the next negative comment would have consequences. We have started, gentlemen, and will continue until we've finished. You're crazy! Stan backed away as far as the restraints allowed. What the hell do you think you're doing? These clothes are going to be ruined. Cohen slipped on a pair of black leather gloves, picked up a log from the wheelbarrow closest to Stan, and tossed it onto the fire. Trying not to let his temper get the best of him, Stan said, I didn't say anything about him. You can't get mad at anyone but yourself, Cohen said smugly. The two of you have the power to end this. I recommend doing it quickly. Stan used the back of his forearm to wipe the sweat from his forehead. He looked down and saw that the tips of his $400 shoes were melting. He bent over, picked up the end of a burning log, and tossed it at Cohen. Turn this shit off and let me get the fuck out of here before I sue the hell out of you guys. Cohen picked up the extinguisher and sprayed the burning log by his feet. You probably should have taken a closer look at the contract. Always read the fine print, Stan. Stan reached for a log, but his hands came too close to the fire. The lighter fluid that had rubbed off on him from the log he'd tossed ignited, and he threw his blazing hands into the air. Screaming in pain, he looked at Cohen, who was standing there with the extinguisher. What do you say? Please, Stan yelled. Please put it out! Cohen put out the fire on Stan's hands, covering the entire front of his body with the white foam. That's a freebie. No more Mr. Nice Guy. I suggest you two get started. Stan started to object, but Gary said, I think we should talk, Stan. Come on, I'm scared. Stan ripped off his shirt and wrapped it around his smoldering hands, hoping to ease the pain. What the fuck you want to talk about? You put me in here, you goddamn Jew! Cohen tossed another log onto Stan's side. What did I say now? Personal attacks won't help you come to a satisfactory resolution. He's not even Jewish. It's just an expression. Jews are known for being cheap. Thanks, but I'm well aware of that stereotype. Gary said, It's fine. Let's just talk and get this over with. It's starting to burn my legs. Gary looked to Cohen and asked, Can't we just stop this? We understand. Cohen pointed to the yellow button next to the intercom. That unlocks your restraints. Come to a satisfactory resolution, and I will press it. Gary said, You backdoored me and stole my major accounts, ones I had before we even started our partnership. Now it looks like I'm not bringing anything to the table. My take-home pay is half of yours. Is that why you're stealing? Gary didn't answer. Cohen picked up a log and asked Gary, Is that a true accusation or a false attack? When Gary didn't answer, Cohen threw a log on each side of the blaze. Answer him, you prick, Stan said as he nudged away a burning log. You know you're stealing. I had to. You took all my accounts, Gary said with a whine. You weren't servicing them right. If you had, maybe your clients wouldn't have approached me. I didn't service them right? That's what I said. Gary looked defeated when he asked, Like my wife, you son of a bitch? Is that why you slept with her?" It was impossible to tell if it was tears or sweat rolling down his cheeks. Cohen threw 2 logs onto Gary's side of the pyre. "Sit and calm yourself." Stan smiled, even though he could barely see Gary's deflated face through the rising flames. Unable to stop himself, Stan said, "If it makes you feel any better, we never did any sleeping." Gary cried out and jumped to his feet, forgetting about the ankle restraints and raging fire in front of him. He fell face first onto the inferno and panicked, throwing logs out of his way. His shirt was on fire when he got back on his feet. Cohen doused him with the extinguisher and told him to sit. Once Gary was seated, Cohen threw 2 more logs onto Gary's side and tossed the extinguisher behind him. "No more chances. You 2 better hurry." Seeing his partner on fire sobered Stan. Trying to regain control of the situation, he said, "I'm sorry, Gary, but I didn't exactly rape her." Speaking so low that Stan could barely hear him over the crackling fire, Gary said, "You were screwing my wife in my own office." "She seduced me. You know she's not my type. You've seen the girls I've been with. I like them young and tight, not middle-aged and saggy." Cohen tossed 2 logs onto Stan's side. They caught fire and rolled onto Stan's shoes, setting his jeans on fire. Stan brought his shirt-wrapped hands to his pants and slapped the fire out. "I didn't say anything," Stan yelled, knowing he wouldn't survive many more logs. "Stan!" Gary shouted. "Let's agree on something. Hurry up! My pants are melting!" Stan kicked at the burning logs and set his jeans on fire again. "Put me out, you fuck!" he ordered Cohen. Cohen stepped behind Stan's wheelbarrow and grabbed the handles. Stan whipped his head back to Gary, whom he could no longer see. "Sell me the business for $200,000 plus you keep 10%. Gary cowered in a heap of sobbing moans. The fire seared his calves and climbed his legs. "You miserable Jew!" Cohen heaved on the handles and dumped the logs into the pit. Within seconds, the flames licked the ceiling, engulfing Stan's legs. Barely able to think, Stan shouted, "We'll never agree. There's no solution." "There's always a solution," Cohen said as he turned toward the door. "And this one is fine by me."
Well, we hope that you enjoyed our latest horrific tale. If you want to keep up to date with the future episodes, then subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow our social media pages. You can also give the channel support by visiting our merchandise store and picking up some of our items. Please also take a moment to support our contributing artists who very kindly lend their talents to the show. Check out the links in the description on how you can do this. Well, that just leaves me to say, until next time my friends, keep it creepy, keep it horrorific.